I would like to thank Vaikuntha Priya so very, very much for organizing this program. She, for giving us the opportunity to pay our last respects to a pillar of ISKCON, one of the people that will go down as a legend in the annals of ISKCON's history, as one of the most sincere and closest and most intimate disciples of Srila Prabhupada. Brahmananda was the second devotee that I ever met in December of 1970. When he came to Gainesville to visit his younger brother, Gargamuni, who I had met in November, and Gargamuni was the first devotee I ever met. This was not a temple where there were a lot of ISKCON devotees and so forth. This was the wilderness of North Florida in what Prabhupada referred to as a very remote place of Gainesville and Alachua. When he came there later on in that year. Prior to that, Gargamuni and Brahmananda, I'm just going to say Gargamuni, Brahmananda because Maharaj, they were Maharajas then, they were Prabhus later. It's just Brahmananda, Gargamuni. And Vishnu Jan Maharaj had been traveling. They had hitchhiked from up north someplace, I'm not sure where, down to Florida. And they, what's that, New Vrindavan? And they were living in Peacock Park in Coconut Grove, which is where all the hippies and young people would hang out. It was the big place in Miami. And they were living in that park. And they actually got caught in a hurricane, which Florida is well known for having a lot of hurricanes, and they were living under a tree, taking shelter under a bench during that hurricane, the three of them. Later on, when Sridham came down to Miami to become the temple president, they left. Gargamuni came to Gainesville, Brahmananda went to Tallahassee, and Vishnu Jan Maharaj went to either Houston and then Austin or straight to Austin. I can't remember which one, but eventually he ended up in Austin. And in those three places, they made tremendous numbers of devotees. Gargamuni had got there in November, and he was preaching in the Plaza of the Americas, which is the place where they have that Krishna lunch program every day. They've been having it for 40 years. That's where Gargamuni first went, sat down under a tree, like Prabhupada did in Tompkins Square Park, chanted. A crowd came along of students. He'd give a little lecture, and whatever prasadam he could muster, he would give out after his little lecture. Then at night, he would go around and try to find places to stay. Attics, utility rooms, storerooms, closets, wherever somebody would put him up. So Pushta Krishna and I, or Bhakta Paul at the time, every night we would go looking for Gargamuni to see where he was. It's very hard to talk about Brahmananda without talking, for me, simultaneously for Gargamuni at the same time. To me, they were alter egos. They were just joined at the hip. And on that little presentation that Vaikuntha Priya was referring to that Gargamuni gave in Vrindavan, Prabhupada told Gargamuni to take care of Brahmananda. And that's what Gargamuni always did. Gargamuni had two people in this world that he really loved, above and beyond everybody else. First was Prabhupada, then was Brahmananda. Brahmananda and Prabhupada were his life and soul. And he served Brahmananda for the last 30 years, trying to take care of him and help him preach and do his service to Srila Prabhupada. So anyway, we'd go looking every night for Gargamuni. And then one night we found him in a utility room. It gets a little chilly in North Florida in the wintertime. And we found him in a utility room next to the hot water heater trying to stay warm. And he had the brown Bhagavatam was open. He had it on a little mat. That's the first time I saw the original Bhagavatams. And prior to that, I had been quite interested in, as someone referred to it, mind expansion substances, and reading Russian mystics, these books by these various Russian mystics. So when I saw this book, this Bhagavatam, I was hypnotized. I just looked at it. I said, this is the most mystical thing I've ever seen. I didn't know what it was, but I was certainly captivated. But then my Jewish nature took over at that point, and I said, I can't stand this anymore. And I said to Gargamuni, I can't take this anymore. Every night you go someplace, we don't know where you are. We don't know if you're warm, if you're getting anything to eat. So why don't you just move in with me? And Gayatri and I were renting a little apartment a couple of blocks from the campus at the University of Florida. Said, just move in with us. I just can't take it anymore, so just move in. So he did, quite eagerly. Then the Christmas break of 1970, Brahmananda, who had been up in Tallahassee, he came down to Gainesville to visit. And I remember we were in the plaza, Gargamuni and I. All the students had gone home, and we were just hanging out there, I guess. And I remember this big guy coming across campus, across the Plaza of the Americas. And then Gargamuni got up and went over, and they both just embraced each other like these two giant saffron elephants in the middle of the plaza. And I remember looking at this scene, and I said, these boys at that time had such love for each other that I couldn't even imagine. Then that night, he spent the night, Brahmananda, and I had to cook breakfast for them the next day. At least try to cook something for them. All I remember specifically is by the time I was done, the kitchen was completely stripped of everything in the entire kitchen, and all they could do was say, more, more, more. See, I can't, what am I going to do here? Anyway, after the Christmas break, Brahmananda went back to Tallahassee, and then, of course, Gargamuni started what is now known as the Krishna Lunch Program in our apartment, which was a couple of blocks from campus in those days. And even then, we had, within weeks, literally weeks, we had 100 people a day, students coming to the temple for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. In a month, Gargamuni had 15 people living in the front room of the apartment, men and women in the same room. People in tents out in the backyard. And all he would say was, don't worry about the rules and regulations, just chant Hare Krishna and everything else will take care of itself. We had no idea what a temple was, what ISKCON was. We were just in this outpost in the middle of nowhere. So Gargamuni had this incredible program going on. And then out of the blue in January, he got a letter from Prabhupada in January of 1971. And Prabhupada instructed him or asked him to go to Pakistan. And he asked Brahmananda to go to West Pakistan. I don't really need a mic. Okay, all right. Okay. So this letter is probably one of the most astonishing letters. I didn't read it at the time, but I knew a Prabhupada letter had come. Everybody knew a letter from Prabhupada. It was the first time we ever heard of anybody getting a letter from Prabhupada. But it's such an astonishing letter that I thought I should read a little portion of it. He says, I've just written one letter to Brahmananda Maharaj informing him of our very good reception here in India and how our devotees in Sankirtan are being appreciated by all communities here because of the high standard of their pure devotional service. Many persons are simply surprised that this Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya has been so nicely accepted all over the world with such good results. It is actually revolutionary. I am very eager to see that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's desire is fulfilled as far as possible to make this movement international, even to the towns and villages. People sometimes inquire if we have gone to Pakistan, and I am thinking, why not? Both India and Pakistan are in great distress because of this false partition, and I am sure the whole matter can be put to right by proper application of our principles of Krishna consciousness. So when this letter came, I was quite stunned. ISKCON had never seen a college program like this before. All these devotees were coming, they were joining left and right. I said, how can Prabhupada send them to Pakistan? This doesn't make any sense. Look at all the things that he has going on here, all this success that he's had. But Prabhupada's vision was so much greater than all of us combined. And in the next part of the letter he says, which explains why he said, Gainesville, that college doesn't matter. I have something bigger in store. He says, I know there is already good acceptance of our Krishna consciousness philosophy because there is one preacher already in East Pakistan for some years, and Muslims are giving him all help. But we want to present the pure thing as we are taught by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that will bring in a real change. If this program in Pakistan is successful, the whole world will have to see the transcendental potency of pure Sankirtan movement, and it will be to your credit. I have made sannyasis for this purpose, to spread up Krishna consciousness all over the world, and I am confident of your ability to do it. You have now learned the life of a sannyasi by practical touring and preaching. Now it is my desire that you apply for some concrete results in this new field. If you do it, it will be a very great service to the movement and humanity at large, and I will be very pleased with this work. Then at the end of this letter, Prabhupada says, if you need any money, I will give you whatever you need. This is January 1971. So I was shocked when he left. I couldn't believe it. I wasn't initiated. He put me in charge of the temple, Bhakta David. The only devotee we really had was Radha Ballabh, the old BBT Radha Ballabh, who was a kamikaze brahmachari from San Francisco, who drove everybody crazy. So they left. And Pushta Krishna Maharaj, then Bhakta Paul, left, dropped out of pre-med. He was a pre-med student at the university with a 3.9 something average. He'd been accepted at all these very prestigious medical schools. He just dropped out of school and went with them to Pakistan. And Brahmananda went to West Pakistan. And when they got there, they proceeded to get caught in the middle of the Bangladesh Civil War and the war between India and Pakistan. And I don't think we can really appreciate the severity or the danger of that they were in. But I did when I was doing some research for something else, and that's why I had to look back at these letters. And this is an article called the Bangladesh Genocide Archive that relates back to 1971. There was a Hindu dormitory in Dhaka, at the University of Dhaka. It was just Hindus. And a Pakistani general was quoted in the Asia Times as saying, we will go to Bangladesh and we will slaughter 3 million Bengalis, and then they will not give us any more trouble. So Gargamuni and Brahmananda walked right into the middle of this. When they got there, this war was raging, and Hindus, students, intellectuals were being murdered, slaughtered. 40 years before ISIS even was born, this was going on in West Bengal, in Bangladesh. Of course, Prabhupada was very concerned about their welfare, and this is what he wrote to Karandar in April of 1971. He says, this day, the whole day has been to me an anxious time because I have heard very bad news from Pakistan. In a local paper, it is published that 4 of our Hare Krishna movement missionaries were killed in Dhaka by Pakistani soldiers. I am very much anxious to know about Brahmananda. I had advised Brahmananda not to go to Pakistan after the civil war began there, but I am afraid that he was very daring and might have gone against my instruction. So I am very much anxious to know about Brahmananda. The whole day has been full of anxiety, and still it is going on. So if possible, inquire and let me know by telegram. So Brahmananda wrote an article in BTG about when he got back from Pakistan. Actually, it was Gargamuni who got back first, and he arrived in Bombay on Ram Navami. He tells this story on the video. And when Prabhupada saw him, he ran up and gave him this huge bear hug. I mean, a very, very tight hug. And Gargamuni was stunned. He felt like all of his sinful activities and reactions had just been lifted right out of his body. And then Gargamuni fell down to Prabhupada's lotus feet and grabbed his ankles as hard as he could and put his head right between Prabhupada's lotus feet. And Prabhupada slapped him on the back and pulled him up by his sikha and said, it will be all right. Then when Brahmananda came back, he did something very, and of course Gargamuni had done that previously when Prabhupada was leaving New York to go back to India, when all the devotees thought he was leaving to die in Vrindavan because of his heart condition. And by the way, the story that Gargamuni told me that Brahmananda referred to on his memories, when they went into the hospital to sneak Prabhupada out in the middle of the night, they put on trench coats and sunglasses and hats, like, you know. I think it was Brahmananda, Gargamuni, maybe Kirtananda, and they went into the hospital and they wheeled them out in the middle of the night to get them out of there. But anyway, when Brahmananda got back, Prabhupada gave him a similar hug. And Brahmananda was embarrassed, he was sweaty, he was dirty, he'd been traveling. And then Prabhupada was so relieved to see both him and Gargamuni. But when Prabhupada had been leaving to go back to India, Gargamuni had done a similar thing at his feet. And at that time, Prabhupada slapped him on the back and picked him up by his feet and said, it will be all right. So he did it again when Gargamuni came from East Pakistan to Bombay. So anyway, back at the ranch in Gainesville, well, this is all going on in Pakistan. We're back in Gainesville, and of course things are proceeding to fall apart. We get kicked out of our apartment because so many people were coming every day, and Gargamuni put madras cloth over all the walls, and the landlord just completely freaked out. And we got booted, and we had to move to another temple further away. And like I said, I wasn't initiated. I had no idea what I was doing. Radhabala was driving everyone nuts. And so finally I called up Satsvarupa Maharaj, our GBC, and I said, you got to send somebody here. And that's when Srinivasa Maharaj and Nang Manjari arrived and took over the temple there. And then shortly thereafter, in July, Prabhupada came to Gainesville in July of 1971. And I was in the room with Prabhupada, and I was telling him how the temple got started. And Gargamuni always acknowledges it. You can say anything you want about Gargamuni. He doesn't care. He laughs. He thinks it's funny. You call him a crook, he laughs. You call him this, he laughs. One time I was doing some legal work for him down in Key West, and we had to go to a city commission meeting. And the next day the newspaper said, yeah, there was a Armani lawyer from LA at the meeting with his fat, big-mouthed client, Greg Scharf. This was in the newspaper. But Gargamuni just laughed. He just thought it was funny. But if you said anything bad about Brahmananda, you better be out of there very quickly or you're in big trouble. You could not say anything about Gargamuni but to speak of Prabhupada. Gargamuni worshipped Brahmananda, literally. So anyway, I was in the room with Prabhupada, and Gargamuni says he was my big brother, and he always was, he was never envious of Brahmananda. He wanted Brahmananda to get the credit. He wanted Brahmananda to be recognized. And that's what he did. That's the service he did for many, many years, is trying to promote Brahmananda. And so when I was in the room in July of 71, and I was telling Prabhupada about how the temple got started, and I said, yeah, Gargamuni came, and Gargamuni did this, and Gargamuni did that, and Prabhupada was nodding. Gargamuni, and he'd nod. He looked almost bored or indifferent. Then I got up to the point where Brahmananda had come to visit Gargamuni in Gainesville. And I said, and then Brahmananda came. And as soon as I mentioned Brahmananda's name, Prabhupada's whole face just lit up. And his eyes, you've seen these pictures of Prabhupada's eyes are so big and wide. And his eyes got wide, and he smiled from ear to ear, and he goes, oh, Brahmananda? And he wanted to hear every little detail about Brahmananda. And I thought at that point, I said, I really don't know much about this Brahmananda guy, but I know one thing, I better not ever commit any offenses against him, or I'll be in big trouble. Because I could just see from that small little interaction with Prabhupada how much Brahmananda meant to him. And I think what Brahmananda meant to all of us, because Prabhupada, ISKCON, and Brahmananda will be forever intertwined in history. You cannot separate them. So thank you again, Vaikuntha Priya, for this opportunity.